Media and Games Invest Group has closed the books for 2020, and with me in the studio, or maybe on link rather, I have the CEO, Remco Westman. Welcome.
Hi Martin, thanks.
So let's start with some of the numbers. You showed quite significant growth, both on revenue side and the EBITDA side. Can you elaborate a bit on what's driving the growth?
Yeah. 2020 was a very good year for us. Again, I mean, we have had now 6 years in a row with over 40% growth per year, and last year was even better. Full year growth of 67% over the year before. And what's driving it? I mean, one thing in 2020 that was very special, of course, is COVID. We had a very strong Q2. Q3 was also good, but people were less at home. But also Q4 was very strong on the gaming side. A lot of updates in the game, so organic growth is really good. We did a big acquisition, but you will only see that with KingsIsle, as we announced. But that's only to be seen in the numbers from 2021, so that's not yet in 2020. And on the media side, I mean, that's what we started a few years ago. Gaming we're doing now for, let's say, over 8 years. Media we're doing now for 4 years. And there we start also seeing really that the synergies kick in, that organic growth is starting to grow. So also in media, Q4 was really good.
Now you mentioned all of these different parts of MGI. Is there any specific segment within the group that is performing better than others?
Yeah, we are running 2 segments. The one is gaming and the other one is media. Both segments by themselves are really interesting, also growth markets both. But the reason we're running them together is the big synergy between the two. For gaming, the main success factor is content, and the second largest is user acquisition. And that's with our media, we can do that much better. And having the media companies, they also work for our competition, of course, for other game companies. So that's really, extremely good. And that has been driving growth. I mean, the combination between the two, the synergies, but also each of the segments themselves.
Now, one thing that has helped you drive growth is the pandemic stay-at-home policies. That's what you mentioned in the report. Do you see any risk of that effect being switched to reverse now that people go back to societies? Maybe people are longing for an outdoor hike instead of staying at home playing computer games. What do you see?
Yeah, I think people want to get out of the lockdowns. Also, if you look at the streets and everywhere, people are out already, I would say. So there is, even if there's lockdowns by the governments, people are not always keeping that much. We are getting more and more into, let's say, from a gaming point, I think, to a normal situation. But also in non-COVID times, games has always been growing. And so I don't see any stop in the trend. The only thing is that COVID was a kind of accelerator on the revenues because people were just playing more, but also on new customer intakes. And what we see that the customers from Q2 are really now adding nicely to the revenues. I mean, it takes a while till a new customer in an MMO, which is our main kind of games, is really starting to generate substantial revenues. And that's what we see. So COVID has a positive long-term effect. If we go back to normal, which I hope personally also for all of us, that's going to happen soon, gaming will further grow.
And if gaming will grow further, as you claim here, a lot of people will be playing your games. And I know that you have a big fan base. Could you elaborate a bit on the updates, on the expansions? I'm thinking about a big fan base from the KingsIsle portfolio, for example. What are the closest projects in the pipeline?
Yeah, we have, let's say, many projects in the pipeline. It would go too far, I think, for the interview to go into all of them. We have a big portfolio of games, let's say 10 really big MMOs and several others. For each of them, we're working on new contents, which can be smaller updates like weekly new costumes, new things in the games, but also larger DLCs. And we will also launch new games, also starting to launch more mobile games now. And maybe to give you just a few highlights out of it, Atlas Rogue. It's a game that we bought together with one of our acquisitions. Then we stopped the game because the players were not really happy. The game was just not working. So we've really been doing in-house a lot of development work on it. And it's now in open beta. And it's showing really nice reactions now with players. In the beginning, there were some tech issues, but that's going very well. Then Heroes of Twilight, a license for a mobile game that's going to be launched soon. And much more stuff. Trove on Switch we're working on. So many things to come. And to your question regarding KingsIsle, KingsIsle, our latest acquisition, really happy with it. A cool team, going very well, very positive. And there's so many things we can do in the games. I mean, it's Wizard 101, it's Pirate 101. I think Pirate 101 still has a lot of content that we can do there. KingsIsle, the Wizard also. And we're looking also at maybe porting it to mobile, maybe porting it to console. Those are real big opportunities, but they will also take a bit of time, of course.
Now let's turn our attention to the media part of the group instead. Can you give us a brief update of the latest there? What's happening?
Yeah, media, as said before, is very synergetic to the gaming side, but it's also a very interesting sector. The whole media, the market for media is growing. We have, of course, on the one hand, the big players like Google, Apple, Facebook. They're more and more getting to walled gardens, which gives more opportunities for people outside of those like us. Also big changes, IDFA, for example, the identifier of Apple is going to be skipped. So there's a lot of things going on there. And what we see is that with our similar philosophy as in gaming, that we buy companies, that we integrate them, and then also get the synergies out of it. Plus, on top of it, we, of course, acquire new customers, we acquire new publishers, and with that, we really show nice growth. And it took a while. I mean, our margins were not that high in the beginning, but it's really starting to grow now.
Let's focus on the margins a bit as well. I know it's a different way of making money. And there's clear synergies, as you mentioned, but the margins are very different from the gaming side. It's much lower margins on the media side. Is that what we should expect moving forward as well?
Yeah, gaming is a very profitable business with, let's say, gross margins of, depending if you publish yourself or if you have a third-party game, between 50 and 70%, and EBITDAs between 30 and say 60%, or even a bit higher. Media side, I mean, you are an intermediary, and I think it's always a little bit being between two, because you don't want to take too much out of the chain, because somebody who spends his advertising dollar, he wants to get also a lot of media for that. So if the margins would be too high in the media side, you would kill the business. Still, media margins are pretty good. And let's say we are running at the moment with 10% EBITDA and expecting that to grow to 15 to 20% and even over. So it's not as profitable as gaming, but still a very profitable business with a lot of opportunities.
I know that you're always on the lookout for the next M&A target. Can you elaborate on what kind of company you want to buy next?
Yeah, M&A is in our blood, or how do you say that? We typically do 3 to 5 M&A transactions per year. We announced already 2 this year, so KingsIsle, indeed a big one, Liquid or Nexstar Digital, and a smaller media company also, but also showing very nice. Both companies really showing good traction, and we have a very well-filled pipeline. On the other hand, we don't want to overdo it because we integrate M&A. We are very selective. We see, especially on the gaming side, larger targets, some heating up of the multiples that are being paid. We want to grow fast, yes, of course, but also pay attention to not spending too much for a company. It needs to be value accretive, and as such. But there's many targets we're working on the gaming side and on the media side. And for sure there will be, let's say, almost for sure. You can never 100% promise, of course, but no, we are expecting more M&A transactions this year.
Yeah, you're running a really fast pace regards to M&A, but you mentioned here that it's a selection process. You need to prepare a lot. You need to do a lot of due diligence. Can you elaborate a bit on red flags? What's a red flag that would make you back out of an offer?
There's a few things we are paying attention to. A lot of targets already drop out because they just don't get into our main criteria. We want them to have the companies in growth market. We want them where we can also do optimizations in the structure. Let's say south of Europe, for example, would be much more difficult for an acquisition. There must be at least one MMO or one sustainable revenue generator in the company with at least €1 million per year. So those are already hard criteria. If the company doesn't fulfill those, we're not interested. And if you can then go one level further, so let's say companies that go through that stage or past that stage, we look at the product fit first. Is it games that we understand? Is it games that we can improve? Games with sustainable revenues? Or on the media side, is it technology or let's say customer bases that really are accretive and synergetic? Then the second one, very important, the team. We have a great team with all people going forward, really enjoying what they're doing. So we don't want politics in the company. And sometimes you see companies where the team is, not a team. So that's something what we also would pass on, basically. And and very important, of course, the valuation, but that speaks by itself. We typically want to do deals not over a value of 6 times EV to EBITDA, which is, let's say, taking into account synergies. So it might also be that we pay 8 or even 10 times EBITDA, but then there must be a substantial synergy that in the end, the deal for us translates to a 6 times EBITDA. So that's, I think, the main criteria we're looking at. And of course, there's a lot of other factors.
Now, you mentioned one thing here. You mentioned the type of game that you understand the game and it fits to the rest of your portfolio. I'm going to grab one of the questions from the live chat as well. It's one Mr. who's asking, what are the economical advantage from a game that has a long lifespan versus a game that has a short lifespan? I'm guessing his reasoning is MMORPGs have longer lifespans with regular updates, and you can have the same game longer, and compare that to maybe FIFA or NHL or more like titles that you buy new ones each year. What's your thought on this pricing?
Yeah, it's a very good question, and it's indeed what would, let's say, is also getting to the philosophy of our company. Customer acquisition is pretty expensive. I mean, and once you have a customer, the longer he stays and the happier he is, and also, of course, the more expense in the games that you're offering to the customer, the more efficient it is. So if we acquire a customer for, I don't know, a few dollars per customer, a few cents per customer, there is a difference between an MMO and casual. But the longer the customer stays, the more revenue you generate, the more efficient it gets. And that's the reason that we're really focusing on sustainable revenue streams. And that can be an MMO, where people are in 5 years or more, 10 years partly. It can also be a subscription service where people are really doing repetitive revenues. And what we don't like is a game which is, let's say, after a month or so, you at the end of the game, or after a day, actually, this also happens. And then, you would have to acquire the customer into a new game again.
Now I'm gonna lift one last question from the live chat as well before we close out the interview. This is one Mister that would like you to elaborate a bit on market penetration in Asia. What's your strategy? Can you elaborate on that?
Asia is a very big market. It's a big part of the gaming market, and also for media, a very important market. But it has, of course, a lot of political factors that are difficult to judge. There's a lot of competition also, especially on the gaming side. So we don't do direct-to-consumer publishing in, for example, China and Korea, but we are working together with local publishers that know the market. And yes, we get less money then from the game, but it's with much less risk. And vice versa, those people in China also developing games that we then publish in Europe and North America. So it's a pretty healthy combination where everybody does what he can do best. And the market is so big, we cannot do everything, and we don't want to do everything.
That's a great answer, Remco. Thank you so much for sticking around, answering my questions, and I'm looking forward to interviewing again after next quarter. Good luck forward.
Thank you very much, Martin. Thanks. Bye.